Hello and welcome to the Meteorology Matters podcast. As you know, our usual focus here is, well, it's usually on breaking down complex information into understandable insights. We often touch on areas where data accuracy and systemic reliability are really paramount.
Absolutely. Things need to add up.
Right. Normally on this podcast, we lean into topics with, firmly established scientific or verifiable foundations, and we generally don't deal in what might be considered conspiracy theories.
It's usually about the hard data, the established science.
Exactly. However, what happens when new emerging evidence, maybe including a significant legal case, brings really deeply unsettling questions to the forefront? Questions that, frankly, demand our attention, regardless of how unconventional they might seem at first glance. Today, we're going to unpack just such a situation. It's one that challenges our understanding of data integrity in a domain critical to our civic life. It's a deep dive, really, into an unexpected but potentially vital area of public trust.
That's right. And for you, our dedicated listener, someone who, navigates vast streams of information and understands the nuances of complex systems daily, well, we know you value rigorous investigation. This specific subject, prompted by these recent developments, it's something that truly merits a deeper examination, I think.
Yeah.
The legal actions and these statistical anomalies we're about to explore, they sort of push us to consider possibilities we might typically shy away from. But now, there seems to be a tangible basis for discussion.
Okay.
The core of our conversation today revolves around this unfolding legal challenge in Rockland County, New York. It's all about the 2024 presidential and Senate election results there. And in this case, it's begun to shed light on various irregularities that, for many people, have sparked pretty significant questions about the integrity of the voting process itself.
All right, let's unpack this then. Our focus starts with a really pivotal legal development right here in New York. On May 29, 2025, in open court, Judge Rachel Tangway of the New York Supreme Court, she issued a ruling that has certainly sent ripples through discussions about election integrity.
A significant move by the court.
Definitely. She mandated that discovery must proceed in a lawsuit challenging the accuracy of the 2024 presidential and U.S. Senate election results, specifically within Rockland County. And look, this isn't just a casual inquiry or some minor complaint, right? It's a formal legal action.
Right.
It's brought by an organization called Smart Legislation, which is the action arm of Smart Elections. And these groups, they explicitly state their dedication is to ensuring fair and accurate elections. They emphasize their mission isn't partisan, it's more foundational to democracy.
Foundational, yeah. Getting the count right.
Exactly. The lawsuit itself is quite explicit in its aims. It seeks a full hand recount of both the presidential and U.S. Senate races within Rockland County. They're demanding the most direct form of verification for these results, a hand count.
And what's truly fascinating here is the precise nature of the claims they're making. According to Lulu Friesdat, she's the founder and executive director of Smart Legislation, there is what they're calling clear evidence that indicates the Senate results are incorrect.
Clear evidence. That's a strong claim.
It is, and it's apparently based on verifiable discrepancies, not just gut feelings. Furthermore, they assert that there are statistical indications suggesting the presidential results are highly unlikely. So you've got direct evidence claims and statistical claims.
Two different angles.
Right. From their perspective, if these results are indeed inaccurate, it constitutes a direct violation of the constitutional rights of every single individual who cast a vote in that 2024 general election in Rockland County. Their proposed solution, as you said, to determine the fidelity of these results is a transparent public hand recount of all presidential and Senate ballots.
Public hand recount?
Yeah. This approach, they argue, is vitally important, particularly in the current environment, to foster absolute confidence in the electoral outcome. And for anyone who relies on data accuracy, like you do in meteorology, the idea that confidence is built on verifiable results, not just a certified number, well, that's paramount, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's about being able to trace back and confirm every data point. You can't just trust the final output without knowing the process was sound. Okay, so here's where it gets particularly compelling, I think, and where specific examples start to emerge directly from the legal complaint itself. The lawsuit explicitly states that a greater number of voters have provided sworn affidavits asserting they voted for independent U.S. Senate candidate Diane Sare than the Rockland County Board of Elections actually counted and certified.
Sworn affidavits,
Yeah.
so legal testimony.
Exactly. This creates a direct, undeniable contradiction to the official results. For instance, they point to District 39. 9 voters submitted sworn testimony that they cast ballots for Sare, yet the Board of Elections recorded only 5 votes. That's a 44% shortfall.
Wow, that's not small.
No. And similarly, in District 62, 5 voters claimed to have voted for Sare, but only 3 were officially counted. That's a 40% deficit. These aren't, minor rounding errors. They seem to be direct conflicts between voter testimony under oath and the certified totals.
That's pretty concrete evidence they're presenting there.
It seems so. And beyond that, the presidential election results in Rockland County reportedly exhibit numerous statistical anomalies. One particularly striking example cited is the presence of multiple districts where hundreds of voters selected the Democratic candidate Kirsten Gillibrand for Senate.
Okay.
Yet these same ballots registered 0 votes for the Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris.
0 for the presidential candidate on the same ticket.
0. This kind of ticket splitting where voters choose candidates from different parties, look, it's common to some extent, right?
Sure, people split tickets.
But at this kind of scale, and specifically for the very top of the ticket where presidential candidates usually have pretty high voter engagement, it raises immediate questions about data integrity. It makes you wonder how such a significant number of people would apparently skip the presidential race while still meticulously voting down ballot.
Yeah, that pattern does seem counterintuitive, especially the 0 votes. You'd expect maybe a few undervotes, but 0 across hundreds of ballots where other races were marked, that's odd. And to provide even more statistical weight to these concerns, a statistician formally determined that the 2024 presidential election results were statistically highly unlikely in 4 out of the 5 towns within Rockland County when compared against the 2020 election results.
Highly unlikely. So not impossible, but improbable based on past behavior.
Exactly. This isn't just a casual observation or a hunch. It's a quantified assessment of improbability. It means the observed data deviates significantly from what you'd expect based on historical patterns and standard statistical models. It points to a divergence from established electoral patterns that, warrants deep investigation, moving beyond just anecdotal evidence.
Right.
And adding to this, Max Bonamente, he's a PhD, professor of physics and astronomy at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, and he's actually written the textbook on statistics.
So he knows his numbers.
He definitely should.
Okay.
He stated in an upcoming paper on this Rockland data that, and I quote, "These data would require extreme sociological or political causes for their explanation and would benefit from further assurances as to their fidelity."
Extreme causes. That's telling.
It is. This statement from a respected statistician, it really underscores the profoundly unusual nature of the observed data. He's suggesting its explanation lies outside typical, predictable electoral behavior. When you have a physicist and statistician, someone trained to analyze complex data with precision, saying something is highly unlikely and requires extreme explanations, well, it certainly signals something significant that probably can't be easily dismissed.
Okay, and the lawsuit also focuses heavily on what's called drop-off irregularities. Can you explain that a bit for listeners?
Sure. So drop-off is essentially a measure of the difference between the votes a presidential candidate gets and the votes a major down-ballot candidate from the same party gets on the same ballot.
Right.
In a typical election cycle, you'd expect someone voting for, say, the Democratic president to also vote for the Democratic senator, right?
Right.
There's usually some consistency.
Makes sense.
So the drop-off rate, the percentage of people who vote for the top of the ticket but not the down-ballot candidate of the same party, is usually pretty small, maybe 1–2%.
Okay, so very low normally.
Very low. So any significant deviation from that range immediately raises eyebrows. A large positive drop-off means the presidential candidate did much better than their party's down-ballot candidate. They overperformed.
Got it.
In Rockland County, the Republican drop-off was reported at 23%.
23% compared to 1 or 2.
Exactly. It means 23% of Donald Trump's vote totals in Rockland County exceeded the Republican Senate candidate's votes. This indicates, according to the analysis, that the presidential candidate far outperformed his down-ballot counterpart. It's a surprisingly large and statistically unusual margin.
Suggesting a significant number of voters supported Trump, but specifically not his party's Senate candidate in that county.
That's the implication of that number, yes. Conversely, the Democratic drop-off was a negative 9%.
Negative? How does that work?
It implies that 9% of Kamala Harris's vote totals were below the Democratic Senate candidate. So the Senate candidate got more votes than the presidential candidate of the same party.
Huh. So people voted for the Democratic senator, but skipped voting for the Democratic president on the same ballot.
That's what a negative drop-off suggests, yes.
Yeah.
And this is described as a highly unusual phenomenon. It was reportedly repeated across the state and, intriguingly, across the country. A negative drop-off is particularly rare because usually the top of the ticket pulls votes down the ballot, not the other way around.
Right.
And Rockland County is specifically highlighted as the first county where this particular negative Democratic drop-off is being formally investigated through a legal challenge.
Okay, so these gaps, 23% positive Republican, negative 9% Democratic, that's a huge swing compared to the typical 1–2%.
Absolutely. The significance of these gaps cannot be overstated, especially when typical rates are so low. These figures, according to the lawsuit, could indicate that votes were miscounted, which is a direct challenge to the certified results. This kind of deviation from expected patterns, it's exactly what prompts deeper investigation in any data-driven field, whether it's modeling complex atmospheric systems or scrutinizing election results.
Like spotting an unexpected pressure drop, signaling a storm.
Precisely. It's about spotting the outliers that suggest an underlying issue, something that requires further analysis and can't just be ignored.
And this isn't without precedent, finding issues through data analysis, right?
Not at all. The information we've reviewed provides some compelling examples where rigorous statistical analysis played a critical role in uncovering election problems. For instance, you had Bladen County, North Carolina. Statistical discrepancies there were instrumental in helping investigators identify fraudulent absentee ballots in both the 2016 and 2018 elections.
So the numbers just looked wrong.
The patterns didn't match expected human behavior, which led investigators to uncover orchestrated illegal activities, like ballot harvesting. It shows the power of data patterns in revealing underlying problems.
And there was another case in Philadelphia.
Yes, involving an election judge who repeatedly committed election fraud. Apparently, this was discovered not by some big external audit initially, but by a local election official. They noticed that the election results simply did not reconcile correctly within their own internal checks. They saw something was off and reported it to law enforcement.
So internal checks caught it.
Right. It highlights that human error or intentional malfeasance can sometimes be unmasked by rigorous data checks, and that the system, when working as intended, can potentially flag these anomalies.
Okay. And any other examples, maybe machine-related?
Yes. Critically, there's the case of Windham County, New Hampshire, after the 2020 election. There, voting machines were found to have counted results incorrectly, leading to pretty significant discrepancies in a state legislative race.
What caused that?
The root cause was later identified as a combination of things: dust in the machines affecting optical scanners and folds in the absentee ballots passing directly through the score marks for one specific race.
Wow, simple mechanical stuff.
Simple mechanical and handling factors, yes, but they led to incorrect official counts. And the incorrect counts were only discovered because of a mandated recount, and later explained by a detailed forensic audit. So these examples, they illustrate that election system problems, whether they're mechanical, accidental, or intentional, they're not unprecedented. And recounts or in-depth analysis can be absolutely crucial in identifying them.
Which brings us back to Rockland County.
Exactly. The current discovery process there, ordered by Judge Tangway, is designed precisely to provide both the court and the public with a clearer, more transparent view into what factors might be contributing to these alleged irregularities. The plaintiffs, smart legislation, they anticipate taking depositions, basically sworn testimonies outside of court, and compelling the release of documents and data. Getting under the hood, so to speak. Trying to, yes. The ultimate outcome, look, it's not directly seeking to overturn the national presidential election results. Kamala Harris hasn't challenged the national result, but it could potentially alter local election outcomes in Rockland or reveal systemic issues that impact other races, prompting further scrutiny across wider electoral landscapes.
So it's really about dissecting the process itself.
It's about dissecting the process, not just accepting the final tally. Much like, a forensic meteorologist would dissect weather data after a major event to understand exactly what happened and why the models maybe didn't capture it perfectly.
Okay. Now let's shift gears a bit and move into the technical side of this discussion, because the lawsuit in Rockland County is also putting a pretty significant spotlight on the voting machines themselves, specifically those made by ES&S.
Election systems and software, yeah. One of the biggest vendors in the U.S.
Right. And the software updates those machines received before the election. The underlying question here, as the legal complaint alleges, is why some machines in Rockland County, particularly in the town of Ramapo, recorded 0 votes for Kamala Harris.
The 0 votes again.
Yeah, even on ballots where voters clearly made choices in other races like the Senate and House, it raises this urgent question. Did the machines just fail, like a simple malfunction? Or were they somehow modified or compromised without proper oversight, leading to these specific kind of targeted anomalies?
It's a critical distinction.
It is. And for anyone familiar with the precision required in complex systems, I mean, you know this,
Yeah.
when the output doesn't match the input, the integrity of the whole system is immediately called into question.
Right. It's like a critical sensor in a weather forecasting model,
Yeah.
suddenly reporting 0 wind speed when everything around it shows a strong gale. You instantly know something is wrong, and that data point is unreliable, potentially compromising the whole forecast. And this takes us to the role of Pro-V&V. They're one of only 2 federally accredited testing labs for voting machines in the entire country.
Only 2. Not many.
Not many for such a critical function. The documents indicate that between March and September 2024, so in the run-up to the election, Pro-V&V approved 4 updates to voting machine software and firmware across the U.S. These changes affected components like printers, file locations, ballot bins, audit functions, essentially key operational parts of the election system.
So not trivial parts.
Seemingly not. But they were categorized by the Election Assistance Commission, the EAC, as de minimis.
De minimis, meaning too small to matter.
That's the crucial classification, yes.
Yeah.
It suggests they were deemed too minor to warrant full public testing or extensive scrutiny. In theory, de minimis changes are supposed to be trivial, like fixing a typo in a help screen, not something that would affect core functionality or security. Now, Jack Cobb, he's Pro-V&V's lab director, he directly rejected the notion that these updates compromised the election. He stated in an email, "There really is no change of any significance." And he also asserted that all the relevant details were publicly available on the EAC's website. But this is where a significant point of contention arises, particularly from groups like Smart Elections. They argue that de minimis' label was misused here.
Right. And Smart Elections, through their Substack blog, Dissent in Bloom, they offer a starkly different interpretation of these updates. They contend flatly these weren't minor tweaks. Instead, they claim these updates touched ballot scanners, modified audit files, and even affected machines flagged by CISA.
CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, that's serious if true.
It is. Their argument is that by labeling these changes de minimis, the whole process bypassed full testing, public scrutiny, and transparency. This raises significant concerns for them about the true scope and impact of these updates. If these changes were indeed substantive, then the de minimis classification would have essentially allowed them to be implemented with minimal oversight.
A potential loophole, they'd argue.
That seems to be the implication. Cobb, for his part, dismissed these claims as completely made up, standing by Pro-V&V's assessment that the changes were insignificant.
So, a direct disagreement.
A fundamental disagreement about what truly constitutes a minor versus a major change in these highly sensitive electoral systems. Which, for any of you listening who deal with mission-critical software, it's analogous to the difference between a minor patch to fix a display glitch in some operational system and a significant unverified overhaul of the core algorithms.
The perceived impact and the process for approving the change is everything when system integrity and public trust are at stake. And beyond the software updates themselves, public confidence in these machine certifiers has reportedly been undermined by other issues, specifically around transparency and just basic accessibility. It's highlighted that Pro-V&V's website was largely offline for months following the election.
Offline? The certifier's website?
Largely offline, apparently. And as of June 2025, it reportedly remains mostly a placeholder page with no easily accessible public database of their testing records.
That seems problematic.
Smart legislation certainly thought so. They publicly questioned it, asking, why would we trust a company that has let its website disintegrate publicly for over 6 months to test complex electronic equipment that we rely on to determine who controls the Treasury, the military, and the policy of our entire nation?
It's a fair question about appearances and due diligence, isn't it?
It is. Cobb, in response, stated that the site was indeed down briefly in February, but insisted it is now live, though he did concede some parts reportedly remain incomplete. But this whole back and forth about the accessibility and transparency of public records for testing election systems, it's yet another flashpoint in this broader debate surrounding election system reliability.
Yeah, the inability to easily access testing documentation for critical systems would be a significant red flag for anyone concerned with auditing and accountability in any field, not just elections.
Definitely.
So what does the broader expert community say about all this? Are they all leaning one way?
Well, as you might expect, they're divided on the definitive causes of these anomalies. but there is a clear point of agreement on the necessity of investigation. Kostas Panagopoulos, he's an election expert from Northeastern University, he emphasized that unusual results should always be checked. That's a consensus across disciplines. Anomalies demand scrutiny.
Check the weird numbers.
Exactly. However, he also cautioned against immediately jumping to conclusions about fraud without clear proof. He stressed the need for thorough investigation before assigning blame. He suggested that the drop-off inconsistencies could reflect the idiosyncratic nature of the 2024 presidential election cycle, implying that the unique political landscape or voter behavior might contribute to these patterns in ways we don't immediately grasp.
So maybe it wasn't machines, maybe it was just weird politics that year.
That's one possibility he raises. He also added that alone, statistical comparisons to previous cycles cannot provide definitive proof of wrongdoing, which is important, right?
Right. Patterns are suggestive, not proof in themselves.
Correct. It underscores that while patterns might be odd or even highly unlikely, they don't automatically equate to malfeasance. There could be complex sociological or political factors at play that defy easy explanation. More investigation is always warranted before drawing firm conclusions.
Like unexpected weather patterns needing extensive meteorological analysis before you can say exactly what caused them.
Precisely. Nonetheless, Panagopoulos also unequivocally agreed that the system must be held to account, and he acknowledged that mistakes can happen. And this highlights a consensus that I think resonates deeply with anyone managing complex systems. Regardless of the ultimate cause, whether it's simple error, a design flaw, or intentional action, scrutinizing these election results is a necessary step to strengthen public confidence.
It's about verifying the data, not just accepting it blindly.
Exactly. Verifying the process and the data. Now, the lawsuit itself, as we said, it's not seeking to overturn Donald Trump's certified win nationally. But if the court does find that votes were incorrectly recorded or not counted at all in Rockland, it could have significant ripple effects.
Like what?
Well, potential impacts could include tougher review processes for future voting machine software updates. Maybe lawmakers push for more transparent, more rigorous audits that go beyond current standards. You might even see a push for the reintroduction of hand-counted paper ballots in some states, moving away from purely electronic systems, or at least having more robust paper trails and audits.
So the core question for the court isn't really who won.
Not directly at the national level, no. It's more fundamentally, did the process itself function as intended? Did it accurately record the votes cast? And that raises a profound question for anyone who trusts data. If the process of obtaining that fundamental data is compromised, what is the true meaning or validity of the outcome derived from it?
Right. If your weather sensors are faulty, your forecast is questionable no matter what it says.
Exactly that.
Okay, now, we need to venture into territory that, as we noted right at the top of this Meteorology Matters podcast, is typically outside our usual scope. But the Rockland County lawsuit, as we've discussed, it kind of opens a door to further, much larger questions. And one particular document we reviewed presents a narrative. Look, it's highly speculative, it's controversial, but it claims to offer a much larger, overarching context for the alleged irregularities we've been discussing.
A bigger picture theory.
A much bigger picture. This narrative suggests that the missing votes in Rockland County are merely the tip of the iceberg of what it calls a full-scale operation that extended across the 2024 swing states and even into Texas. Now, it's really important to stress here, we are impartially relaying the content of this specific document as part of the information provided for this deep dive. We are not endorsing its viewpoints or validating its claims as factual. Okay?
Understood. Presenting the claims, not confirming them.
Right. The document posits a theory of a systemic digital occupation, describing it as clean, credentialed, and remote-controlled. It alleges a dark Enlightenment coup and hints at a vote-flipping algorithm.
Those are very strong terms.
Extremely strong terms. And the narrative certainly paints a provocative picture, even as we acknowledge its highly controversial and, frankly, unverified nature at this point.
Okay, so where does this particular account begin? How does it build this narrative? Well, this specific account starts by tracing a path back to March 2021. It points to the sale of a company called Triplite.
Triplite. They make surge protectors, battery backups, that kind of thing, right?
Exactly. Widely known hardware brand. They were sold for $1.65 billion. The buyer was Eaton Corporation.
Eaton. They're a big global power infrastructure conglomerate.
That's right. And crucially, according to this document, Eaton had an existing partnership with Peter Thiel's Palantir.
Palantir, the data analytics company. Okay, so Eaton buys Triplite, Eaton partners with Palantir. What's the alleged connection to voting?
What's alleged here is that these trip-light devices, the battery backups and surge protectors, are physically connected to ES&S central tabulators and electionware servers, and also, apparently, to Dominion tabulators and central servers across the country.
Connected how? Just for power.
The document claims they aren't just dumb devices providing power backup. It asserts they are smart UPS units' uninterruptible power supplies, meaning they are programmable, updatable, and capable of direct communication with the election systems they're connected to via common ports like USB, serial, or Ethernet.
So they can talk to the voting machines.
That's the claim. And the critical assertion is that ES&S electionware, which runs on Windows OS, automatically trusts connected UPS hardware. It sees it as a trusted device. So the theory put forth is that if Eaton pushed an uncertified update to these UPS units, it could have gained root-level access to the host tabulation environment.
Root-level access. That's like complete control, right?
Essentially, yes. Unrestricted administrative control. The idea is this could happen without ever modifying the certified election software itself. It bypasses that layer of scrutiny.
A backdoor through the power supply.
That's the theory presented. Furthermore, the document claims that in Dominion's Democracy Suite 5.16 software, these UPS drivers are listed as optional. This, the document argues, implies they can be updated remotely without triggering certification requirements or oversight, making them unregulated, invisible, and perfect for infiltration, according to this narrative.
So a potential hidden pathway for manipulation via seemingly harmless hardware, that's the core idea.
That's the core idea presented in this document, yes. A unique, potentially undetected entry point.
Okay, so building on this alleged foundation, the narrative continues by highlighting Eaton's deepening partnership with Palantir Technologies in May 2024. The document emphasizes that Palantir wasn't brought in for just typical customer service or basic IT support,
Right?
but rather to do what it does best, manage, shape, and secure vast streams of data quietly. And for anyone listening who works with immense data sets, you understand the power of data manipulation and analytics. The idea of an entity quietly managing and shaping critical data is, well, it's potent and, depending on the context, potentially quite concerning.
Indeed. Data shaping can mean many things.
According to Eaton's own public release, which is cited in this document, Palantir's role would include things like AI-driven oversight of connected infrastructure, automated analysis of large data sets, and this is the point the document really flags, secure erasure of digital footprints.
Secure erasure of digital footprints. That sounds significant.
The document directly interprets that phrase as forensic sanitization. It implies that this capability was embedded into Eaton-managed hardware connected directly to voting systems, leading to the very bold assertion that, quote, Palantir didn't change the votes. It helped ensure you'd never prove it if someone else did.
Wow. So not accusing Palantir of the act itself, but of providing the means to cover the tracks if something happened.
That's exactly the claim being made in this narrative, a very pointed claim about how data might be handled or obscured after the fact.
Okay, this narrative then introduces another element, a platform called ballot proof.
Yes.
It's described in the document as a ballot scrubbing platform, apparently co-created by someone named Ethan Chautran, identified as a longtime employee of Elon Musk and currently associated with DOGE.
Ballot proof. Sounds like it should be about transparency.
Well, it was reportedly pitched publicly as a transparency solution, an app designed to let people verify scanned ballot images and ostensibly support election integrity efforts.
But the narrative suggests otherwise.
In the context of this overarching speculative narrative, yes. The document claims that with Palantir's AI controlling the back-end data handling and ballot-proof cleaning the front public interface, only one thing was missing: the signal to go live.
Implying a coordinated effort.
It suggests a coordinated effort to control both the underlying data infrastructure and the public-facing verification tools, creating a system where, according to this unverified narrative, irregularities could potentially be managed, obscured, or scrubbed from detection.
A sophisticated, multi-layered approach to potentially hide manipulation, making it much harder for independent observers to verify the results. That's the picture it paints.
That's the picture it paints, yes. A system designed, in this view, to control the narrative of the data.
Okay, so the timeline, according to this document, then progresses to September 2024. This is when Eaton formally partnered with Elon Musk.
Musk enters the picture now.
Yes. The stated public purpose of this collaboration was described rather vaguely, focusing on things like grid resilience and next-generation communications. Standard corporate partnership language,
It
perhaps,
was fairly
on the
innocuous.
surface. Yet the document claims that buried in the partnership documents was this line: exploring integration with Starlink's emerging low-orbit DTC infrastructure for secure operational continuity.
Starlink DTC, direct-to-cell technology.
Exactly. And this, the document argues, sets the stage for what it dramatically calls the activation. It alleges that on October 30, 2024, just literally days before the election, Elon Musk activated 265 brand new low Earth orbit, or LEO, V2 mini satellites,
Okay.
each one reportedly equipped with this direct-to-cell DTC technology.
Yeah.
The claim is that this DTC tech is capable of processing, routing, and manipulating real-time data, including voting data, through his satellite network.
Manipulating
Oh.
voting data via satellite. That's a huge leap.
It's a massive claim. The document specifically states that DTC doesn't need routers, cell towers, or even a traditional SIM card. It connects directly from a satellite to any compatible device.
Any compatible device.
Mhm.
Including, the document alleges, embedded modems in air-gapped voting systems, smart UPS units, or unsecured auxiliary hardware.
So, bypassing air gaps, which are meant to be secure isolation.
That's the explicit claim. The implication, according to this narrative, is profound. Commands could be sent from orbit, patch delivery became invisible to domestic monitors, and compromised devices could be triggered remotely.
It paints a picture of unprecedented remote access and control, effectively bypassing conventional security measures that rely on physical or network isolation. That's extraordinary, if true.
It is an extraordinary claim, yes.
And one striking detail emphasized in this document is the alleged speed of this Starlink DTC project. It claims that this groundbreaking project, which it says should have taken 2+ years to build, was completed in just under 10 months.
That is fast for complex satellite tech. Extremely fast, according to this account. The narrative questions Elon Musk's reported silence on this achievement. It notes he typically boasts endlessly about everything he's launching, building, buying, or even just thinking about whether it's real or not. The document finds this apparent silence weird, suggesting it's uncharacteristic for someone so publicly vocal about his accomplishments, especially something this technically significant.
Highlighting the lack of fanfare as suspicious in itself.
That's how the narrative frames it. And adding another sort of cryptic layer to this, the document references New York Times reporting from October 5th, just before this alleged Starlink DTC activation. It quotes a text allegedly sent from Musk to a confidant. "I'm feeling more optimistic after tonight. Tomorrow we unleash the anomaly in the matrix."
Anomaly in the matrix.
And then an hour later, another alleged text. This isn't something on the chessboard, so they'll be quite surprised. "Lasers from space."
Lasers from space.
This document interprets these texts, perhaps unsurprisingly given the context, as a blueprint for the alleged operation, a pre-election hint at a planned disruptive intervention. It implies lasers from space isn't literal, but maybe a metaphor for a discrete, high-tech, unexpected operation launched via satellite.
Wow. Okay, so according to this highly speculative account, what was the alleged outcome of this elaborate multi-layered operation involving UPS units, Palantir, ballot-proof Eaton, and Starlink?
The alleged outcome, according to this document, was election data that makes no statistical sense.
No statistical sense. How so?
The document specifically claims a clean sweep in all 7 swing states,
Yeah.
and the fall of the blue wall, the term referring to traditionally Democratic states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, that shifted Republican.
A clean sweep.
Yes, it states that 88 counties flipped red, not one flipped blue across these key areas, and that every victory landed just under the threshold that would trigger an automatic recount in those specific states and counties.
Just under the recount threshold. That seems convenient, if true.
Extremely convenient. And for anyone who understands statistical significance and how rare such uniformly one-sided outcomes are in large, complex data sets, especially across multiple independent state systems, well, these claims are designed to be quite provocative.
Such a pattern, if it actually occurred exactly like that, would be highly unusual, to say the least.
Statistically improbable under normal circumstances, the document implies. Furthermore, this narrative asserts that Donald Trump outperformed expectations in down-ballot races with margins never before seen, while simultaneously, Kamala Harris underperformed in those exact same areas. It goes so far as to claim that if you were to accept these results at face value, then Donald Trump, despite being a 34-count convicted felon, supposedly outperformed Ronald Reagan in terms of electoral performance, Reagan's victories often being considered benchmarks.
So, sweeping claims about a very distinct, targeted, and statistically improbable pattern of results focused on swing states and election day votes.
That's the core of the outcome described. And the document cites the co-founder of something called the Election Truth Alliance, who claims these anomalies didn't happen nationwide. They didn't happen, apparently, across all voting methods, like early voting or mail-in ballots. Instead, the claim is they were concentrated, targeted, and specific to swing states and Texas, and specific to election day voting.
Concentrated and targeted, not random noise.
That's the assertion. This particular count dismisses conventional explanations like, oh, her policies were unpopular, arguing that such general explanations would likely show broader, more consistent effects across all voting methods and regions, not just election day votes in specific locations.
Right, unpopularity presumably wouldn't just affect election day machine voters in swing states.
Exactly. It challenges the logical leap required, in their view, to believe that in all the battleground states, Democratic voters were so disillusioned by Vice President Harris's platform that they voted blue down ballot but flipped to Trump at the top of the ticket. And again, the document emphasizes this alleged behavior wasn't observed in early voting or by mail, but with exception to Nevada, only on Election Day, and only after a certain threshold of ballots have been cast.
After a threshold.
Yes, where VP Harris's numbers begin to diverge from her own party and Trump's suddenly begin to surge. The document says, in the world of election data analysis, there's a term for that pattern.
Which is?
Vote flipping algorithm, suggesting a calculated automated manipulation kicking in at a certain point rather than organic voter behavior.
Wow. That is a very bold assertion pointing to specific, quantifiable shifts rather than just general trends.
Really bold, yes.
So, okay, we've heard the alleged how and the alleged what. This document then ventures into attributing motives, the why, right? Why would this alleged crime of the century, as it calls it, happen?
Yes, it goes there. It attributes high-stakes motives to the key figures and names. For Elon Musk, the narrative claims he faced the real possibility of a prison sentence if Trump lost, linking this to various ongoing investigations or potential legal troubles.
Okay.
It asserts that his bid for Twitter, which it notes was $20 billion over market value, came just 49 days after Putin invaded Ukraine, suggesting the timing alone should have raised every red flag about the underlying motivations.
Connecting the Twitter deal to Ukraine. How?
It connects this to a purported ROI, or return on investment, of $15 trillion in mineral rights tied to Ukraine losing the war and geopolitical deals Trump could greenlight. Suggested the Twitter acquisition wasn't a loss, it was leverage.
15 trillion. That's an astronomical figure.
It is. The document uses it to paint a picture of immense financial stakes tied to the war's outcome and Trump's potential policies. Furthermore, this account claims it's no secret Musk was in communication with Putin for over 2 years and alleges he even granted Starlink access to Russian forces, a move this document flatly labels as treason.
These are incredibly serious accusations, tying business decisions directly to geopolitics, war outcomes, and immense personal, legal, and financial stakes.
Extremely serious, yes. Painting a picture of deeply intertwined interests, according to this source.
And what about Peter Thiel? What motives are attributed to him and others?
The narrative then turns to Peter Thiel and what it disparagingly calls the broligarchs, described as tech billionaires who worship at the altar of shower-avoidant blogger Curtis Yarvin.
Curtis Yarvin, the near-reactionary blogger.
Yes.
Oh.
This document claims these individuals casually joke about humane genocide for non-producers and have long viewed democracy as a nuisance, an obstacle to their vision of hypercapitalism and themselves as the permanent ruling elite.
So an ideological motive. Anti-democratic.
That's the attributed motive. It connects this alleged ideology to political outcomes, asking rhetorically whether the elimination of Medicaid isn't akin to humane genocide, and questioning why his 40-year-old protege and political rookie, J.D. Vance, is vice president. It suggests that if third-term legislation were to pass, it would hand Vance a minimum of 12 years at the helm of Thiel's regime. Again, these are claims originating solely from the provided document, attributing a specific, radical ideology and long-term political plan.
And finally, for Donald Trump himself.
For Donald Trump, the document claims he was facing 88 felony indictments and was therefore desperate to avoid conviction. That's presented as a primary motive. It also alleges he was locked in a decades-long alliance with Vladimir Putin, an alliance this source claims is now impossible to ignore.
Linking desperation over indictments with alleged foreign ties.
Yes. This is linked directly to his stated policy trail. It asserts he froze aid to Ukraine and has threatened to place sanctions on them while planning to lift sanctions off Russia, and that he openly campaigned for anti-EU candidates and sided with Russia in multiple key United Nations votes related to the Ukraine conflict.
And
The document concludes this section with the highly charged statement. Donald Trump pledges allegiance to a red, white, and blue flag. It's just not the American one.
Okay. Very strong claims about motives tying personal legal jeopardy, ideology, and geopolitical alignments together as the driving forces behind this alleged operation. Again, we stress these are the motives presented in the document we reviewed, not established facts.
Correct. It's crucial to maintain that distinction.
So, after laying out all of that, what does this all mean for the future if any of these narratives hold any weight at all? What are the implications or proposed paths forward?
Well, the documents we've explored, both the legal filings and the more speculative narrative, suggest that the Rockland County lawsuit, even if it doesn't overturn the national result, represents a crucial first step. It implies that if the court finds clear evidence that votes were wrongly recorded or simply not counted, it could have significant ripple effects on future election processes.
We touched on this earlier, tougher reviews for voting machine software.
Potentially, yes. Maybe lawmakers feel pressured to push for more transparent audits that are more rigorous and publicly accessible than current standards might require. And as we mentioned, some states might possibly reintroduce hand-counted paper ballots as a primary method, or at least demand more robust paper trails and audits, moving away from a complete reliance on electronic systems they feel lack transparency.
So, for any of you listening who are accustomed to systems where anomalies, errors, or unexpected results lead directly to reevaluation and improved procedures, well, this concept of continuous improvement in electoral systems would resonate deeply, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. It's about taking lessons learned from current challenges, whatever their cause, to build more robust, more resilient, and more trustworthy systems for the future. Just as meteorological models are constantly refined based on observed deviations and forecast errors.
Right. Learning from mistakes or perceived mistakes.
The more provocative document we discussed also outlines very specific actions it believes are necessary, echoing its sense of urgency. It claims, quite dramatically, we don't need permission to enforce the Constitution. We need courage. And it suggests that while state attorneys general begin their investigations, it only takes one U.S. senator to initiate the disqualification proceedings against the unelected and unfit occupant of the Oval Office.
Wow. Okay, that's obviously a highly charged political statement within that source material calling for immediate drastic action based on their allegations.
Extremely charged, yes. But it highlights the proposed stakes of the alleged findings, according to that narrative. More concretely, though, this document recommends specific steps for state attorneys general and investigators to take.
What kind of steps?
Things like conduct independent forensic audits of the UPS firmware on Dominion and ES&S machines, specifically looking for any uncertified or unauthorized modifications hidden there. Subpoena communications between employees at Eaton, Palantir, Starlink, and the testing lab Pro V&V, trying to uncover any alleged undisclosed dealings or coordination.
Following the communication trail.
Yes. Also, audit Starlink satellite logs for the specific week of the election to track data transmissions, looking for unusual activity related to those DTC satellites. Freeze any uncertified infrastructure updates on voting systems going forward. And, critically, recount physical ballots by hand, which they see as the ultimate verifiable measure against potential electronic manipulation.
So a fairly detailed investigative wish list.
It is. And the document concludes with another provocative claim, that this alleged technological toolkit for manipulating elections is now being rolled out abroad. It claims countries are allegedly being forced into Starlink contracts in exchange for tariff relief, concluding that the U.S. election wasn't their endgame, it was their litmus test.
Implying a global agenda based on a successful U.S. operation. Again, a very bold and unverified claim from this source.
Very bold indeed.
Well, what an incredibly detailed and frankly at times quite unsettling examination of information we've undertaken today. We've really covered a wide spectrum, haven't we? From the concrete legal proceedings in Rockland County with their specific statistical anomalies and direct voter affidavit contradictions.
Grounded in court filings and specific data points.
Right. All the way to these broader, far more controversial narratives about potential systemic manipulation involving powerful companies, advanced technologies like AI and satellites, and high-stakes geopolitical motives.
A much wider, more speculative net.
Definitely. Regardless of where you, the listener, stand on these various narratives, whether you find the Rockland specifics compelling or the broader claims plausible or completely outlandish, the underlying questions remain. Questions about election integrity, about data verification, about the transparency and trustworthiness of the complex systems we rely upon, they remain incredibly important, don't they?
Absolutely crucial questions.
And for you, our listener, someone who likely works with complex systems where the smallest detail, the slightest anomaly, can have massive implications. Well, the concept of vigilance, of scrutiny, of demanding verification, it's not just academic, is it? It's fundamental to ensuring trust and functionality in any critical system.
It really is.
This Meteorology Matters podcast has, we certainly hope, given you much to consider as you reflect on the reliability of the data that underpins so much of our modern society.
Indeed. I think the fundamental lesson here, whether we're talking about analyzing atmospheric pressure systems for tracking hurricanes or scrutinizing electoral processes for accurate vote counts, is really the same. Complex systems demand absolute transparency and unwavering verifiability. Full stop.
Transparency and verifiability.
Right. When unexpected data patterns emerge, when things look highly unlikely or contradict direct observation, it's not just about the final outcome. It's about the integrity of the process that produced that outcome. And this raises, I think, an important, maybe even provocative question for all of us to consider. If questions of this magnitude can arise about something as fundamental as our electoral counts, something we assume should be straightforward, what other hidden vulnerabilities might exist in the vast, complex, interconnected technical and data systems that underpin almost every aspect of our modern world? Where else might the data not be telling the full story?
That is a powerful thought and maybe a slightly unsettling one to leave you with as you go about your day. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive from the Meteorology Matters podcast. For more deep dives into complex topics that matter, please make sure to follow meteorologist Rob Jones on Instagram. His handle is Meteorologist. You can also find him on TikTok at TV Meteorologist and subscribe on YouTube to Rob Jones Hurricane. That YouTube channel is also where you'll find the full Meteorology Matters podcast playlist. We look forward to exploring more complex systems and data questions with you next time.